Okay, peeps, welcome back. So today we're going to be going over Bitcoin and where the price could be going over the next 3 to 6 months. So with that being said, let's get it. Okay, so before we get into the price chart of Bitcoin, let's go ahead and talk about the indicators first. But before we do that, I want to show you guys the portfolio here. So we do still have all of our positions exactly the same as they were the last time we showed you guys this. With one exception, we added a little bit more to AIOZ. And I'm going to get into that in a minute as to why that is. But as you guys can see, all of our different native cryptocurrency holdings, this is entirely separate from the Grayscale Trust and the Bitcoin miners. We have all of these on separate accounts, and these are considered to be separate investments, even though it's within our overall generalized crypto portfolio. So we have Filecoin, AIOZ, Bitcoin, Dash, Render, Banker, Crypto.com, Horizon, The Graph, Scale, Engine Coin, Zcash, Ethereum, Litecoin. We do have some Algorand as well, but it's not on here. And of course, we have some Luna Classic. We tried to get in massively on the dip during the Luna Classic collapse. And yeah, I don't think we're ever going to get our money back on that, but not really too worried about it. We've more than made up for the loss on that. So not a big deal. So anyways, some of the big ones in here that, in my opinion, I think could have massive potential in the upcoming bull run is Filecoin, AIOZ, Render, definitely Render, Crypto.com, and even something like Engine Coin, because again, Engine Coin's a gaming coin, and the gaming narrative is huge in crypto. So AIOZ and Render are both AI tokens. So again, anything AI, artificial intelligence, you already know that's going to moonshot. Crypto.com is an exchange token. Again, when it comes to exchanges, the more inflows that they have during the bull run, the higher the price of the tokens are going to go naturally. And then Filecoin is what's known as a DPIN project, DEPIN. If you don't know what that is, go look it up in your own time. So what we're thinking we're going to do here is we're going to pick 4, 5, maybe at most 6 of the tokens that we already have, and we're going to concentrate into those heavily going into the end of the year. So we want to get each of these positions that we're talking about to somewhere between $4,000 to $5,000 each. Now, we haven't decided exactly which 5 we're going to pick yet, 4, 5, or 6, I should say. But 2 that we are certain about that we're going to put that much money into is AIOZ and Filecoin. And we're kind of at this point, because it looks like Bitcoin's going to pull back, although we don't know for sure. We're kind of in a toss-up between, do we start DCAing into these positions now on the way down, or do we wait for some bigger pullback to buy lower and then start DCAing in? We're kind of stuck in between those two mindsets at this point, so not really sure what we're going to do yet. When we do, we'll let you guys know. So anyways, going into the indicators here, you can see that basically for the crypto search term, we're pretty much at all-time lows here. Again, when things were really popping off, they were at 100 here, and then you got like 69, 70. So again, there's not really much interest right now. And once again, I will say that we are in a Fed tightening cycle. That's true. But Fed cuts are pretty much right around the corner, okay? I just took a look at the Fed Watch tool this morning, and the markets have repositioned their beliefs that the first Fed rate cut is going to come in September. And again, we'll get more deep into, my personal thoughts on where I think the Fed rate cut's going to come, why it's going to come, all that stuff in a later video. We're not going to talk about that today. But when the Fed rate cut does come, the easy money policy, the quantitative easing, is going to come back into the market. It'll be cheaper to borrow. More companies will be hiring. And ideally, we don't have a recession between now and then. Okay, we have some kind of soft landing or no landing, and then we basically see a V-shaped recovery, and then that's when all the money is going to pour into crypto. All right, so that's the first thing. Second thing is, according to the cycle timing, we're still very early. Bitcoin's not even supposed to be at all-time highs until the end of the year, so this is actually quite normal for this time of the halving year. And again, you guys can see like we're in May of 2024 right now, right? So in May of 2020, which was the previous halving year, you guys can see that this thing was basically flatline. It was pretty much right around here. So again, this is very normal. We're early in crypto. People that fill their bags now, and I'm not promising this is a guarantee. Nothing's a guarantee in trading and investing. But people that fill their bags before the FOMO starts kicking in generally tend to be the best off. So that's the crypto search term. Bitcoin, very similar thing. It was kind of higher up here during the peak of Bitcoin, and then it kind of fell off. The fact that it's pulled back this much tells me that, again, a lot of traders and investors are becoming complacent when it comes to crypto. So the thing that I've noticed with crypto is it's generally when it's the most boring. It's during the most boring time frames when it's chopping around, going sideways, maybe going down a little bit, doing nothing. That is typically the time when most people fall off. And that's also simultaneously generally one of the best times to pick up crypto on the dip when nobody else cares about it because it's so boring, right? So that's kind of what this trend is showing me. Again, we are still very early. This time last cycle, we were kind of pretty much around that same level. So 16 to 27, we're currently at a 21, which indicates, again, we're very early. So crypto fear and greed, this thing is kind of swinging between 50 and 100. As you guys can see, it's a little all over the place. This is one of the indicators that told me that there was a pullback coming, and turns out that it was right, because pretty much when it gets anywhere between 70 to 100, that's generally a pretty good sign that there is going to be at least a correction. There doesn't necessarily have to be a massive 50% drop or a bear market, but there is at least going to be some kind of correction. So that has kind of de-risked now. As you guys can see, it's way down here, kind of around on that 50-40 level, somewhere in there. So it's not expensive, but not cheap, but it's still far less expensive than it was up here at 85. So MVRV, this has kind of de-risked a little bit as well. Again, it didn't really hit that high of a level before. It was only at a 3, whereas this thing has gotten all the way up to a 9 or a 10 in the past. And this thing is pretty much perfectly predicted whenever it got into this pink box up here, every single cycle high, almost exactly. So again, we're very, very far away from those zones up there. This is a pretty bullish metric in my opinion. So Bitcoin rainbow chart. One thing I pointed out to you guys before is generally after the halving, you can see the gray lines here going down are the halving dates. Usually we'll see some kind of pullback and or sideways chop after the halving. Saw it back here, saw it right here. Even saw it on the previous cycle, so kind of down sideways a little bit, and then we started getting the market phase, and then we really took off. So again, we're kind of pulling back into the halving and after the halving. So this is very normal. Okay. Again, this is only in the buy. I suspect this thing is at least going to get somewhere to around hodl. Maybe is this a bubble before we see the peak? And again, I think the peak is going to be sometime somewhere between the middle to the end of next year, is just my opinion, if everything plays out like I think it's going to. So again, we did just have the halving. So Bitcoin's not going to have another halving again until the 28th. Like I told you guys before, based on my personal experience, I found that the best times to pick up altcoins or anything altcoin related is 6 months before the halving to 6 months after the halving is generally when you're going to get the cheapest prices. So anytime basically from October of 2023 to October of 2024, just my personal opinion, is going to be your best bet. And that still remains true to some extent because, again, a lot of the altcoins have popped off, but there's many, many more altcoins that have not actually started moonshining yet. Okay, like Filecoin, for example, is one. Dash is one. Litecoin hasn't really done much of anything. Some of the other ones have pumped a little bit, like Dogecoin and Crypto.com, but we haven't seen like really seriously parabolic moves yet. In a true altcoin season, nearly everything is going to pump. Okay. Even your shite coins like Digibyte and Tron and Bitcoin Gold, some people might like those, but I personally don't like them. But even those went up, 10, 15x in the last cycles. So that's the Bitcoin halving. And again, the Newpol chart, this one is a little bit more bearish looking. So generally speaking, when we get pretty close to this euphoria greed area here or into it, that indicates the cycle high. And again, we are not in that area. And you can see the peaks here do kind of come down over time. Although I don't think this is actually the true peak right here, because again, if this was to remain consistent, It doesn't look like I can actually draw a line on the chart, but if it was to remain consistent in its downtrend, I would say it's probably going to be higher than where the previous peak was. So a pullback is definitely healthy in my opinion. I think it's probably going to pull back a little bit more. We might get into optimism, anxiety before we see some kind of recovery. So pi cycle top, there's a couple of really important things to note here. So we pulled back to the yellow EMA, or I should say simple moving average, which currently is at, looks like maybe 55, 57,000, somewhere in there. So the important thing to note about this is, generally speaking, going into a bull run, we bounce off of the yellow EMA and kind of bounce in between the yellow and the green one before the big bull run move actually happens. You can see it happen the first cycle here. So we kind of tested in between these EMAs and then boom, rip to the upside. Second cycle, tested in between the EMAs, boom, rip to the upside. Third cycle, tested in between the EMAs. Not really so much this cycle, but a little bit, kind of right here, and then boom, straight to the upside. So we're kind of in the testing phase right now, which is another thing that tells me that we're likely not at the cycle peak yet. So the high currently on this is about 80,000, and the low is at 57,000. And again, the green EMA does not have to hold. I think it is likely that it's going to break out of there and go higher. So again, in order for the pi cycle top indicator to actually signal that the top is in, if it's going to, the yellow and the green EMA at least have to touch. And they're not touching currently. They're still pretty far apart. So that's just kind of what we're looking at on the pi cycle top indicator. And in my opinion, we have a long ways to go before the cycle peak is going to be in. I don't think anything's going to change with the cycle. The cycle theory that every 4 years we have a bull market, I don't think that's going to change, even with the spot ETFs being in play. And I say this because, again, Bitcoin does look like it's going to pull back. So if we get a pullback, we might kind of pull back and then bob around, chop up, kind of in between this trend line up here and this trend line down here, just kind of blah, 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 and then bang, straight up, which if it does pop out of here in September, that would line up perfectly with the first Fed cut or Fed rate cut, which is predicted by the markets to happen in September of this year. So again, we have a MACD death cross here on the weekly. You guys can see each time we had one of these in the previous bull market cycle when it was above the zero line. And I do mean massively above the zero line. I'm not talking a little bit. Like, it should be pretty obvious by looking at this MACD indicator just how far above you want to look to see when the death cross would occur. And that would kind of signal that potentially there may be a local top in at the very least. But every single time we've had that, we have had a pretty substantial pullback. We had our bear market here and then a mid-cycle retracement here before going higher. And I can go even further back in time with you guys and show you guys even more of this just to indicate this. And again, I'm not trying to spook anybody, but we are going to tell it like it is on this channel. Okay, we're not going to try to lie to you and say, oh yeah, Bitcoin's going to $1 billion per Bitcoin and it's just going to go up forever. We're never going to have pullbacks. Guys, we're not going to try to sit here and BS you, okay? We're going to tell you what you see, or what we see, I should say. And, if it comes true, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Okay, look, I'd rather be rich than right. If Bitcoin's not going to pull back 20, 30, 40%, hey, whatever. It can go up to 200, 300, 500,000 for all I'm concerned. As long as all coins follow, we're good, right? So again, you can see it's massively overextended here on the MACD. This indicator was actually a little bit late, but again, that's why we use this in confluence with other things like trend lines. Excuse me. Support and resistance zones, different time frames, all kinds of different stuff. But more or less, it did time almost exactly the top perfectly in the mini bull market in 2019. And then again, you can see in 2017, not perfect, but pretty close. Seeing the EMA start to curl over and the histogram start to move to a lighter shade of green and coming down even before the death cross would have been an even earlier indication that this thing might be about to reverse. The MACD crossing is just a confirmation, but the move in the histogram is the early warning signal. And once again, if I go back even further here, I have to go back even further. But you guys can kind of see this 2016 cycle peak, which again was not a huge move, but again, the MACD did have a death cross above the 0 level, and we got a pullback from there. And then this is all the way back to 2014. MACD had a death cross, and by then we were already well underway and going to a bear market. And again, the MACD indicator does not necessarily have to mean that a bear market is around the corner. Again, the 2019 dump and the mid-cycle 2021 dump were not actually bear markets. It kind of just depends on the timing of the cycle. We're not supposed to be at all-time highs and in an alt season until around the end of this year, first quarter of next year. So in my opinion, this MACD death cross is not the end for the crypto cycle. I think it's probably some kind of mid-cycle pullback or perhaps just some kind of healthy retracement before we see the actual first leg of the bull run. So a few more things I want to go over here. So again, we need to get a break above this trend line. And again, that trend line is sitting somewhere around roughly about where the top of that green EMA is on the Pi cycle top indicator. And just so you all know, the Pi cycle top indicator signal is not going to pop up on the chart unless we get a crossing of these two EMAs, which you can see we don't have here. That's why we didn't pull it up. But it makes sense that there would be a pullback along this kind of line here. So, bears are just sitting up there waiting to short it. There are people in the markets that short Bitcoin. Believe it or not, there is. There's people that do that. There's people that do it in futures. You can trade Bitcoin in futures. And there's also people that were looking at this, probably whales, saying, okay, maybe I should take some profit. However, on the flip side, it does look like we also potentially have a cup and handle here. So again, this would be the cup. This basically entire bear market would have been the cup from the kind of slope down to the slope up. And then we kind of have like so the handle pattern would be right here. And if I was to measure this from the bottom of the cup to the breakout point of the cup, assuming it breaks out on this convergence of the trend lines right here, the target would be all the way up here at 134,000. Is it going to hit that in September 2024? Probably not. But again, that just gives you kind of a generalized idea of what to expect. If Bitcoin hits 134,000, I suspect it's probably going to happen sometime before the end of Q1 of next year. So again, what I think is likely to happen here, I don't think we're going to see this massive drop down to 30K. I don't think that's likely. Again, I could be wrong. We have to see how Bitcoin reacts at this first trend line. So it could bottom out anywhere from 54,000 to, as high as 72,000. Again, that's pretty much more or less where this flag range is. So the flag range is between 75,000 to 58,000. And then we see a breakout because, again, this is theoretically, this is a very bullish pattern. So if this trend line holds and it squeezes up as we're getting these higher lows, again, higher lows going into a coiling move is typically a very bullish move. There's usually a breakout to the upside to follow. And the inverse would be true if it was coiling to the downside and we get kind of these basically like a set of lower highs is what I'm trying to say here. So a few other things I want to look at with y'all. Oh, and again, this markup phase, this is kind of what we're looking for. If you see something like this going into the end of the year, start of next year, that means that likely Bitcoin's about to break out. And the reason I bring that up is because we see something like that here. So move up, sideways, and then boom, take off, right? So we're kind of looking for something like that. You can see the fib levels up here. This is another reason why I say I think the Bitcoin cycle top is not yet in. I do think there will be a pullback. I think the bottom will be probably somewhere around this trend line, maybe down to this trend line. I think this one right here is likely less possible. And again, pulling up the 2-week chart, you guys can kind of see it paints a different picture. So we have all these tops up here, and then we have a lower candle, and we're still within the flag pattern. Again, we don't know that this is actually going to come down to test the trend line because that would break the flag if it did. Unless we get a breakout of the flag pattern, we won't know for sure what's going to happen. So Bitcoin on the monthly time frame, one thing I want to point out to you guys is last cycle. And again, this was around the timing of the cycle that it was supposed to be around. We're a little bit early on this one, but we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 green candles before a pullback. And this time around, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight monthly green candles. So there is going to be some kind of pullback. I mean, this thing can't just go straight up forever. That's just how markets work. But one good thing to point out here is we did have this green candle close above these candle bodies here on the monthly time frame. That is a very bullish sign. So anyways, this covers Bitcoin for this video. Hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see y'all later. Peace.